Just a few of our closest friends here in Calgary gathered together. What a delight to see all of these faces out here tonight. Thank you for joining us on a Saturday morning, maybe to talk about the future of this province and where we're going to go, and to build a little hope and optimism for the future. So thank you very much to all of you and your smiling faces for being here this morning. So I'd like to begin. And maybe I should say, for those of you who don't know, my name is Raki Pancholi. I am the MLA for Edmonton Whitemud and the deputy leader of our party. Also, I'm wondering, does anybody like my t-shirt? I figure if there's any place where you can be a little political, it's at Provincial Council, right? So thank you to all the delegates who are just upstairs to start the work of our Provincial Council, but also thank you to all of you for joining us who are not delegates, but to hear our fabulous leader, Naheed Nenshi, speak this morning. So, I'd like to begin, of course, with a little bit of a land acknowledgement to acknowledge the place that we are on. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge Mohkintas and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Itsika, Nakota Nations, Chiniki, Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Tsuut'ina Nation. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Otipemisiwak Métis government of the Métis Nation within Alberta Districts 5 and 6. And so finally, we acknowledge all First Nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, and play on this land and who honor and celebrate this territory. So I have the very distinct pleasure of introducing to all of you somebody that you might be just a wee bit familiar with, especially in this place, in Calgary. I'm honored, of course, to introduce today our leader, our newly elected leader, Naheed Nenshi. Now, so I'm guessing some of you here in Calgary are just a wee bit familiar with Naheed. I know he had this role, what was it for, was it mayor? Was it mayor? Yeah, I think he did that for a year or 2 or 11 years. Voted the most popular mayor in the country, soon to be voted the most popular premier in the country. But he's also a proud graduate of where we are right now, the University of Calgary. And you know what? Over the last 3 months, he's been working with all of you, with all of our MLAs, with our members to get out and talk to Alberta NDP members and supporters and build more supporters all across this province. So I'm very delighted to introduce him. But before I do, some of you might know, or maybe you caught the song as I was walking up. I don't know if you're as hip as my kids are, but the song I walked up to is a little song by Chapel Roan called Hot to Go. Now, yeah, oh, okay, some Chapel fans in the house. That's nice, that's nice. Now, you know, I know some of my colleagues, you might know her, Janice Irwin. Is anybody familiar with Janice Irwin? Yeah? And Brooks Arcand-Paul, you know, you might know him as well. They're gonna come up because they're gonna join me on stage. And by the way, if any of you caught some of our videos that we sometimes put out as a caucus, we have this incredible woman who works in our staff. Her name is Gina. She's also gonna come up and help us out. Yeah, because we're doing a little bit, okay, it was hot to go before, but come on. We actually heard a better chant, and I think Janice and Brooks, you guys might have come up with it, is that right? Yeah. Instead of H-O-T-T-O-G-O, the better chant is G-O-T-T-O-G-O, Danielle Smith has got to go. What do you think? Yeah? So we're going to ask you to all join in a little chant with us, right? Yes. We're going to get it going because we got to get pumped up for this morning and to hear from our leader, so let's do it. Can we all agree? Can we do the chant? So it goes G-O-T-T-O-G-O, Danielle Smith has got to go. G-O-T-T-O-G-O, Danielle Smith has got to go. Come on. G-O-T-T-O-G-O, Danielle Smith has got to go. G-O-T-T-O-G-O, Danielle Smith has got to go. Now, so I think on that note, the person, thank you, Brooks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Gina. That's because I don't know how to do the dance. That's why they came up. But without further ado, let's all hear from the person that we are eager to hear from, our leader, Naheed Nenshi.
But how great is this? Thank you, Raki. Thank you to wonderful Calgary artist Raghav for that wonderful walk-on music. That song is called Woohoo. I don't see the rain no more. I don't see a cloud in the sky because everything's gonna be all right. And I got my new mug. Merch available in the NDP store. Look at all of these people. This is amazing. I'm so happy to see all of you here on a Saturday morning here in MacEwan Hall. As you know, I used to teach at this university, and I've never had this many people for a lecture before. So thank you all for coming to my lecture of a lifetime on the subject of chemtrails. It's real short. They don't exist. The earth is round. Public health works. Get your vaccine. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I am so happy to be here with all of you, and particularly here on this campus, because as you heard, I'm a graduate, a proud graduate of the University of Calgary, starting my activist life as the president of the Students' Union here, some years ago. I was 9. Some of you may have seen over the course of the leadership campaign, our friend Dave Cornier, the blogger, found a picture, who knows where he found it, of me standing on the patio outside of MacEwan Student Centre, holding up a piece of paper that was on fire. It was Premier Ralph Klein's post-secondary education platform. So I still know a good photo op. I went to school 30 years ago at a very exciting time in politics. It's a very exciting time in politics here at the University of Calgary, where lots of young, up-and-coming political activists were going to school all at the same time. One of them, someone I went to school with, was a woman called Danielle Smith. They told me that this crowd would be like that. And I still remember that Danielle and I took a course, a senior political science course together. The professor was a guy called Peter Lougheed. I feel like one of us maybe was paying attention. Because when we think about what has built this Alberta, when we think about the legacy of this Alberta with amazing political leadership from Peter Lougheed to Rachel Notley, when we think about these things, we think about the kind of government that works. A government that listens to and works for the people, not for special interests. A government that is focused on governing for the future, not the raw pursuit of political power. A government that understands that this place works when every single person lucky enough to share this land is able to live a life of dignity and opportunity. Not a government that pushes down on the most vulnerable. And folks, I have been in public life for 15 years now. I've been a student of public life my whole life. And I have never seen a government like the one we have now. They also told me you would chant shame. Feel free to do so. A government that instead of being pragmatic and solving problems is so nakedly interested in power. A government that is fundamentally disinterested in the act of governing. And while they indulge themselves and their lobbyist friends, while they stack boards and commissions with donors, while they give charter schools to former UCP candidates, life gets harder and harder for the rest of us. But you know what? I think that our friends and neighbors know that the NDP, of course, would be better on health care. I mean, how could we not be? That Alberta's New Democrats will be better on education again. That Alberta's New Democrats will be focused on helping every single person live a better life on this land. But sometimes we hear from our friends and neighbors, but what about the economy? What about jobs? Do we need to put up with this government because at least Conservatives are good on the economy? Well, Let's talk about the economy and affordability for a moment, shall we? How many of us in the room have complained to our friends recently about the price of groceries? Every single one of us does, because they're out of control. Most of us are lucky enough that that is an inconvenience in our lives, or something to talk about. But for far too many of our friends and neighbors across this province, that is forcing very difficult life and death decisions. There are far too many families in this province who are making the rent versus food decision. Because under a Conservative government here in Alberta, we have among the highest inflation rates in the country. The Premier often likes to cherry-pick economic statistics of how well things are going. Do you feel like things are going well? Alberta has the highest unemployment rate in the country outside of Atlantic Canada. We're not used to this. Our auto insurance rates, if you're an 18-year-old man driving a Honda Civic, your auto insurance rates are almost 4 times what they would be next door in British Columbia. If you're a 60-year-old man driving a Ford F-150, your auto insurance rates are more than double what they are in British Columbia. Our utility rates here in Alberta have quadrupled since the UCP took power in 2019. And even though they've calmed down a little bit, they remain by far the highest in the country. Too many of our friends and neighbors are struggling to make ends meet at the end of the month. In fact, some 80% of Albertans suggest that they are worried at the end of every single month about making ends meet. We're doing that in the context of crumbling public services all around us. So let's talk for a moment about healthcare, shall we? Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've talked about how we're worried that we have a healthcare system that is on the verge of collapse. In far too many communities in this province, the healthcare system has collapsed. It has become the norm in many communities to have emergency rooms not open on the weekends, where you have to drive by a closed emerge to get to one that's open. Ironically, the health minister this week made a great commitment to rural healthcare. We're going to study the problem, I think was her commitment. She did it in Hinton. The night before she was there, the emergency room had to close for the night due to lack of staff. As soon as she left, the emergency room had to close in Hinton due to lack of staff. The gall to show up in a place like that is so desperate and offer no solutions. And that is indeed what this government has done over and over and over again. The only thing that keeps our healthcare system going right now is the incredibly hard work and strong backs of the people who work in the system. They go above and beyond every single day. They sacrifice their own happiness and their own family lives because they're looking after the rest of us. And I'm grateful for it. But you know what? It's not fair. It's not right. It's not fair to expect those workers to go to work every single day and have to go so far above and beyond and to be treated not with the dignity they deserve, but with the contempt that the UCP gives them. It's not right, and it's not fair. Sometimes I say that my least favorite thing to do over the last 6 months or so is talk to teachers. I hate talking to teachers, which is a funny thing coming from a teacher. The reason I hate it so much is because the stories I hear are so terrible, and how much worse they've gotten just in the last couple of years. Stories of classrooms of over 35 students in elementary school. Stories of classrooms that are so complex with students with so many needs that teachers just can't keep going on. You know, I remember talking to someone who was telling me that she teaches in an upper income neighborhood in Calgary. And in her grade 2 class, she started this year with 32 kids. And she knows, because not all students show up, on September 1st, that by the end of the year, she's going to have 36 or 37 kids. In that class, she's got students who are struggling with their English language skills, who are newcomers to this country. She has students with incredibly complex behavioral needs, I know one teacher who told me she has a student in her classroom that requires an adult within arm's length at all times. But she's the only adult in the room. There is no education assistance. Education assistants have not been given a wage increase for well over a decade. They're living on poverty wages in one of the most difficult jobs there is. Who would want this job? But this is the government we've got. A government that is so focused on short-term political gain that they can't actually invest in the things that work for everyone. So yes, those students with complex learning needs are being given a very short shrift in a public education system that's meant to serve everybody. But in addition to that, the students without complex needs also are suffering because their teachers have zero time for them. By the way, if you're worried that teachers are pushing the gay agenda, they don't got the time. They're busy grading papers. Every single thing I have, every single thing I am, is due to one thing. And that is due to the fact that my poor family living in poverty always had access to an outstanding public education. But instead of a commitment to that public education, we have what I call a pinball premier. She goes from crisis to crisis, careening wildly, patching up holes in the wall after the water's already come in. Most recently, by the way, have you noticed she's on a new pattern? Every Tuesday we get a random YouTube video. So 2 Tuesdays ago, that random YouTube video was an $8.6 billion investment in public education and building schools. It's a generational investment. We'll give them credit for that. But as a guy who was in government for a long time, I kind of feel like if you're going to make an $8.6 billion announcement, you should probably know what you're going to spend the money on. She couldn't answer questions like how many schools, where. The fact that they made this announcement outside of the regular budget process, and by the way, it's $8.6 billion over a very large number of years. Over the next 3 years, they're going from building 30,000 student spaces to 50,000, which is a lot, but it certainly isn't what she announced. But by announcing all that at once, she immediately caused massive construction cost inflation, and she announced it on the exact day when the construction industry, because of what they did on the Green Line, more on that in a minute, said that they would no longer bid on government projects in Alberta because the government was not trustworthy. So basically, she created massive inflation by making this announcement at once, and she probably won't even be able to build the first 30,000 spaces for the money she's budgeted. That's what happens when you get government that is not competent, government that is not rational, government that is not in any way pragmatic. I've often said that this government is disinterested in governing. They only know how to do two things. You know what they are, you've heard me say it before. They know how to pick fights, and they know how to waste money. That is not what Albertans are looking for. That is not what Albertans need. Let's talk about the Green Line for a moment. In the most shameless act I have ever seen a government do, the minister, on August the 1st, said, we don't love the alignment that City Council has come up with, but we can live with it. In fact, what he said was, quote, you can bank on our commitment. 34 days later, we learned that that particular bank of honesty was insolvent when it comes to the UCP. They lit $2.1 billion on fire. It's 1/4 of their school promise. $2.1 billion. That's after $100 million wasted on Turkish Tylenol. That's after $1.5 billion wasted on a bet that Donald Trump would win the 2020 election. They don't know how to spend money in any way. And why did they do it? Why did they do it? Because one of their brilliant communications people thought that it would be fun to insult me. 3 years before an election. They were willing to light $2.1 billion on fire, $800 million alone in broken contracts, just so they could call it the Nenshi Nightmare. So buy a mug. The mug, by the way, if you can't see it out there, says, Nenshi, Danielle Smith's greatest nightmare. But folks, that's what we have. That's what we have in our government today. We don't have a normal government. We don't have a grown-up government. We have a government that is focused only on the naked pursuit of power, and they don't care who gets hurt on the way. And of course, I have to pause here and talk about the most horrible thing that they're going to do over the next month. Imagine that we have a government that did polling, that did focus groups to determine which vulnerable group was the least popular. And they picked vulnerable children. So I need to tell you something. What is about to happen in the anti-trans legislation that is going to be proposed soon? Nobody asked for it. It's not scientifically proven. And Danielle Smith, under the guise of parents' rights, is taking away the rights of parents and doctors to choose the best possible medical care for their children. I don't know about you, but I do not need Danielle Smith and Adriana LaGrange sitting in the doctor's office with me. This isn't about freedom. This isn't about rights. This isn't about choices. This is about power. This is about Danielle Smith having a leadership review on November the 2nd, and all of us suffering as a result. But I say that politically. But let's strip aside the politics for a second. Here's what we do know. A recent study, a peer-reviewed study in the journal Nature, said that trans children in jurisdictions where anti-trans legislation, like Danielle Smith's legislation, comes into place, increase their risk of self-harm and suicide by over 70%. There are very real consequences to Danielle Smith's political games. So I need to tell you something. If you've got teenagers in your life, whether they're trans or not, I need you to hug them hard. I need you to hug them hard now. And I need you to let them know that over the next few weeks, when they are used as political fodder, that there are adults in this province who love them, who look after them, and who only want what's best for them. That the vast majority of Albertans want them to live a life of authenticity, a life of dignity, and a life of unbridled promise. That is who we are as Albertans. That is what we stand for together as Albertans. And that is what we will deliver. So, folks, the good news is better is possible. And that is the message we have to get out to all of our friends and all of our neighbors. Because here's the thing. Over the last decade or so, politics across the spectrum, much worse on the right, but politics across the spectrum have shifted in a way that I've not seen before. Politicians have realized that they no longer have to appeal to the average person. That if they can get a certain base riled up, then that's all they care about. And that's what we've seen. And that kind of politics leads to a sense of division, a sense of mean-spiritedness, and most of all, a sense of defensiveness. Because that kind of politics says to people, it can never be better than it is today. So we have to grab on and defend every single crumb we've got, because those people are going to take it away from us. That is what has happened in politics around the world. That's why we have these folks claiming to want to go back to a mythical past that never really existed. Take back Alberta. From whom? Make America great again. For whom? But we're better than that as Albertans. We always have been and we always will be. As I always say, it is impossible to dream small under a sky that big. So as Albertans, we know that we can do better. We know that we are risk-taking and entrepreneurial, that we are willing to say, let's try something new. Let's try something better in the hopes that it can be better for everyone. That's really what we stand for, and that's the message that we have to get through to all of our friends and neighbors. Don't settle for what you're being given, because better is possible. So, by the way, you can see behind me that we do have a Q&A, so jump in the queue if you have any questions. Raki is going to monitor the Q&A and come up here and ask some questions. But before I wrap up here, I want to get very practical. At the beginning of this year, the Alberta New Democratic Party was a formidable political force. We'd just gotten 750,000 of our neighbors to vote for us in the last election. We formed the largest opposition in Alberta's history. Under the leadership of a once-in-a-lifetime politician, Rachel Notley. We created an extraordinary movement. And at the beginning of this year, we had 8,000 party members, which is a huge number. Today, friends, we have over 85,000 members of this party. That makes us, we believe, the largest provincial political party in Canada. We also believe that it makes us larger than the federal Liberal Party and larger than the federal Conservative Party. So we have created an incredible movement. But friends, now I need your help, because we have to continue to build that movement. And in the party convention, we're going to talk a lot more about what we're going to do as a party to help. But in this big room, I need to give you a little bit of homework. Are you ready? So homework number 1 is real easy. Number 1, do not leave this place until you've met someone you haven't met before. Exchange contact information. Because friends, this is our family. This is our tribe. This is our movement. This is where change really begins to happen. So look around this room and understand that together we are building a movement for all Albertans forever. Homework number 2. This is the hard one. We have to be able to continue to build that movement at the grassroots. Look, I'm pretty good at giving speeches, right? Mm-hmm. So I will stand up. You're supposed to cheer louder at that. So I will continue to do that. And I will continue with my colleagues in the official opposition to make sure that Albertans are hearing our message. We call that the air war. But we need all of your help to build up the grassroots. And that means you've got to talk to your friends and neighbors about better is possible. It means talk to the other parents on your kids' sports teams. It means talk to the people in your faith communities. Talk in the lunchroom at work. Talk to people about what is possible and reinvigorate and re-inspire their vision for this province. Now, I'm looking out here, and there's no seniors in the room. But if there were seniors in the room, I would add, talk to the people next to you at the aqua size class. Because we need our friends and neighbors to understand that this version of the Conservative movement is not who they voted for 50 years. That Peter Lougheed would find nothing familiar about Danielle Smith. He might remember her as his old student. But that ultimately, we not only represent the values of every Albertan, values about the dignity of every human being, values about building public services so that they are there for everyone when they need them. Values that say, if you go to work every day, you deserve to live a decent life without financial fear. Values that say, if you're not able to go to work every day, the community will look after you. Values that say we treat taxpayer dollars as sacred and we don't waste money. And values that say, in this magnificent place, everyone should afford to have a good life. And those are the conversations we need to be able to have with our friends and neighbors. And that's your job. That's the work that you need to do. I'm going to come back to that in a second when I make a promise to you. But I do have 2 other bits of homework for you. Next bit of homework is now I'm the leader of a political party. Boy, I'm getting used to saying that. I've been here for 3 months and a week, by the way. Sort of how I spent my summer vacation. But I'm told I am past the no-risk return period, so you're stuck with me. But as the leader of a political party, I am contractually obligated every time I speak to say, also, we need your money. And those of you who are at convention, you're going to get a financial report in a few minutes this afternoon. But I need to tell you that thanks to all of you and thanks to your enormous generosity over the course of this year, we have managed to retire our debt. But we've got by-elections to fight, we've got to replenish our coffers, and we need all of you to continue to be great donors. The best way to do that is by becoming a monthly donor, and you can certainly do that while you were here. Oh, I forgot one really important thing. We have 85,000 members today, and it is unbelievably important that we continue that momentum. So you all need to renew your memberships. If you renew now, you will be good through 2025. For those of you who convinced all your friends to buy memberships, and I know many of you are in the room, you got to do that again. Because I've given the party an impossible task, but I like impossible tasks, which is that we should grow the party in 2025. And unlike most parties that lose membership after a leadership race, let's have even more members at the end of next year than we had at the end of this year. Which takes us into my 4th and final bit of homework for you all. Something very special happened in Lethbridge West a month ago. Lethbridge West is a riding that, as Shannon Phillips sent me a big long history of Lethbridge West because Shannon Phillips being Shannon Phillips did. And she has done unbelievable work building that riding along with all of the riding volunteers. For those of you who are political junkies and who go door knocking, I went door knocking in Lethbridge West this week, and I have never before seen data that good. And that is because that riding has really built that up. And Shannon told me that when she first got involved in that riding, they had 65 members. Then they had a contested nomination. So they went up to 150 members. And Shannon, being Shannon, had to point out that she got 120 out of the 150 votes. Well deserved. When we went to our nomination in Lethbridge West earlier this year, we had 1,500 members. But here's the important part. Here's the important part. We got a 73 or 76, I'll call it 75. We got a 75% voter turnout. That is higher voter turnout than any municipal, federal, or provincial election in the last 2 decades. And that means that our new members are not people who just joined the party to vote for the leader, but they are sticking around in the movement. In fact, let me ask that question. How many in the room were members of this party a year ago? Okay, and how many have joined in the last year? It's amazing. Welcome. We're thrilled to have you. We hope you find a home here. By the way, I am one of you. But that is precisely what we need to do, is make sure people are still engaged and involved. So 75% voter turnout, roughly, in Lethbridge West showed that people are committed. And so that is my fourth bit of homework for you. We need to win in Lethbridge West. We have a magnificent candidate, but we need your help. So you can sign up to volunteer. I see that the QR code keeps coming behind me, or you can ask the people at the registration tables how to volunteer. If you can spare an afternoon and come down and do some door knocking in Lethbridge, that would be fantastic. If you can do some phone banking or text banking from home, that would also be fantastic, because we got to win Lethbridge West. And by the way, the UCP also knows how important it is to win Lethbridge West. They are spending untold amounts of money on advertising there already. They're doing TV ads. They're really ineffective, and they don't make me look good. But they don't work. What works is people power. What works is helping people understand how better is possible. And that's fundamentally what we need to do together. So friends, we are on the precipice of something amazing. We are building a movement that has never been seen before in the politics of this country. Who would have thunk that anyone would ever say Alberta's New Democrats are the largest provincial political party in the country? But we need to continue that work. We need to continue that work every single day by reminding our friends and neighbors that better is possible. So I said I was going to make a promise to you. I gave you some homework, and now I'm going to make a promise. And the promise is that your party is with you every step of the way. You may have heard me tell this story before, but after one of our debates, I think here in Calgary, a young father came up to me, he's probably in the room, and said, "I bought a political party membership for the first time in my life." I hear that a lot. And he said, "Now you've got to make it worth my while." And I thought he meant by beating Danielle Smith. But what he actually said is, "Look, I've made a commitment. This is my identity now. It took a lot for me to make that decision. And so my job now, in the community I live in Cranston and Calgary Southeast, is to go house by house, block by block, street by street, and flip Cranston from blue to orange. And then when I'm done in Cranston, I'm going to go next door to Mahogany, and I'm going to do the same thing. And then we're going to win Calgary Southeast." But then he said to me, "There's only one problem. I don't know how. I don't know what I'm doing." And so that's my commitment, my promise to all of you, is that over the weeks and months to come, the party is going to work with you. We will help give you messaging. We will help give you tools. We will help you figure out how to have these conversations with your neighbors. You don't want to be the person that no one wants to stand next to at the aquasize class because they only talk about politics, but you want to have these conversations. And trust me, it works. You know, the municipal elections in Alberta are always on the third Monday of October. The second Monday of October is always Thanksgiving. And I guarantee to you that the only reason I was elected mayor in 2010 is because enough people went to Thanksgiving dinner that year and said, "I am going to talk to my uncle. We never talk politics, but we're going to talk politics." Thanksgiving's next week, by the way. But this is what really works, and this is what we are going to do. So the final thing I'm going to say to all of you is, look, we're going to win in 2027. Knock on wood, inshallah, God willing, all of the things. But what's more important is we have to win in 2027. We cannot afford another term of this government. And listen, that's heavy. That's hard. And I think we all feel the heaviness in this room of what our task is. But I also need you to know something else. That in that service to the province, what I call seva, the Sanskrit word for selfless service, in that service, there is great happiness. there is great joy. The joy comes from so many places. It comes, first of all, from knowing we're right. By the way, I mentioned before that we talk about divisiveness on all sides of the spectrum, and our big job is to remember that just because we're right does not give us the right to be righteous. But part of that joy comes from knowing we're right. Part of that joy comes from knowing that we are building a better Alberta for generations and generations to come. Part of that joy comes from knowing that we're fulfilling the promise of this place, that it doesn't, regardless of whether your family has been here for thousands of generations or whether they arrived last week, regardless of how you worship, regardless of whom you love, regardless of your level of ability, you belong here. You can be safe here, you're welcome here, and you can live a life of unbridled potential right here. That's what we're building together. But the joy also comes from working with amazing people like the people in this room. So look around again and understand that this is a day you will talk about. That you will say, I was there in MacEwan Hall that day. That I was there in MacEwan Hall that day with you and you and you and you and you. And that is the day we began to finish building this movement. And that is what we are going to do together. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm not doing it alone. I want to introduce to you the largest official opposition in Alberta's history. All right, folks. I got 37 people up here with me. And thank you to the wonderful Calgarians, Tegan and Sarah, for reminding us that everything is awesome when you're part of a team. But I think we need to add one more friend. Here we go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Miyashiro, your Alberta NDP candidate for the upcoming by-election in Lethbridge West. Hey, I'm really sorry I can't be at Provincial Council this week, but you know, we're knocking on a ton of doors and finding lots of support, because this is a really important election for us to win. We need every bit of help we can get, so please click on the QR code and find a way to help us. We really want to hold this riding and build on the legacy of our three-time elected MLA, Shannon Phillips. Thanks. Have a great meeting.
Oh yeah, one more thing. One more thing. Forest fires are not caused by space lasers. Thank you all so much. We're going to go to the Q&A, but first, with this great crowd, I got to do the thing I do. We need a great picture.
All right. You're going to come up to the front.
Raise your signs, guys!
Thank you. All right, everyone, let's do this. For Alberta, for all of us.
Woo! We're moving into the Q&A. Yeah, quick.
Thank you. All right, where is my deputy leader? She's
I'm
somewhere
small.
in this
I'm
crowd.
small and I'm here.
There we are.
And I'm wearing flats. I'm trying not to shoo my colleagues off the stage faster. Well, thank you, Nahed. We are now going to do the part where I think we want to hear from all of you. We want to hear your questions. So I know all of you have had a chance to submit some questions, and we're going to get right into it. We want to hear Nahid speak, so I'm just going to sit off to the side a little bit, but I'm going to ask you the questions that we heard. I'm going to pretend I'm drinking from my Nenshi Nightmare mug. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so the first question. What can concerned Albertans do now to address the attacks on democracy coming from the UCP?
You know, one of the things that is very frustrating, I'll tell you that I went to a high school reunion a couple weeks ago. I know, 10 years. I was shocked too. But I saw a bunch of people I haven't seen in many, many years, and they were very excited, and they were saying, you know, when's the election? I can't wait to vote. And I said, well, 3 years. And the most common response I got was, she's only been around for a year? We are 3 years to the next election, and I got to tell you, this is new to me, folks, because I've never been in opposition before. Except I banned the word opposition, right? Raki, skill testing question for my MLA colleagues. What do we say instead of opposition?
We are the shadow government in waiting. That's what we are. We are the government in waiting.
But what we know about being a government in waiting is that this particular government doesn't often listen. Now listen, they do listen at the margins. There are ways in which we can make change, and I think we can take a lot of credit for amplifying the stories of parents and teachers and students about the challenges in public education and putting the pressure on the government to make that announcement to build more schools. We're not just here to get this government to change its mind. We're here to ensure that Albertans know that a better alternative is possible, that a better government is there in 2027. But you all have jobs to do there as well. So number one is all the homework I gave you today. We got to continue to build the movement at the memberships. You got to get people to put down their $10 and become members. You got to get people to volunteer. But mostly you got to get people to talk to their friends and neighbors and continue to build up the story of our movement and what is possible. In addition, it's really important for us as government in waiting to hear your stories. Because while they don't listen to us very much, they do listen to regular Albertans. So we need to amplify those stories. We need to have people understand what you're really going through, whether it's the crisis in healthcare, whether it's what you are experiencing as a parent or a teacher or a student in school. All of these are important stories for the government to hear, and we have a good big microphone. And so our job is we can help you amplify all of those conversations, but we got a lot of work to do. But don't lose hope. We're going to make change now, we're going to make change over the next 3 years, and we'll make big change when we form government in 2027, inshallah, God willing, knock on wood. Because remember, that's the difference between us and them. For them, winning the election is the goal. It's the end game. For us, winning the election is the beginning. And it's the opportunity to make life better for everybody.
So Nahid, this is the next question, is one that I know that's on the mind of many of our members and our volunteers and supporters. So how do you plan on gaining the confidence of rural Alberta voters?
This is probably the most critical question that could be asked today, especially in a province-wide group like this. We have to be able to find a way to talk to our fellow Albertans outside of the two big cities. And that means really understanding how people are living outside of the big cities. That also means understanding that there's not one thing called rural Alberta that's a monolith, but that people in Red Deer or Lethbridge or Medicine Hat or the bedroom communities surrounding Edmonton and Calgary don't really think of themselves as rural Albertans, but they do have a different set of needs that we haven't been able to speak to as well as we should. And then, of course, there are people who live in small communities, who are engaged in farming and ranching and resource extraction, who are living a more rural life. And we have to be able to show up for all of these folks to really understand what they need, and also to help them understand that the current government takes them for granted. You know, the state of roads in rural Alberta has never been more poor. There has been promises for broadband internet, which is increasingly needed to just participate in society. It's not just about getting a better price for the grain, it's about being able to watch Netflix, right? All of this does matter, and those promises have not been kept for over 30 years. We know that the state of rural healthcare is horrifying. We know that in Lethbridge West, for example, we've been promised cardiac emergency services and a catheterization lab for many years. They promised it again in the 2023 election, did not budget for it in 2024, which means if you have a heart attack in southern Alberta and you can't get to Calgary to get your stent put in, your odds of survival are much lower. We know that rural education is in a tailspin where sometimes, even with declining population in schools, the classes are so big because we can't attract teachers. And all we got from Minister LaGrange the other day was some scholarships, which are great for rural family practice medicines, and the promise to start a commission on the future of rural healthcare, as if we didn't know there was a problem, as if this hasn't already been studied. We need the courage to be able to make these decisions for folks. And so those are the conversations we're going to continue. And because this is a party gathering, I'll get a little internal on it as well. So you will notice that we've set up a new shadow ministry, and many of my colleagues have taken roles in that shadow ministry. But we've also set up something called the Leaders Senior Advisory Team. It used to be called the Leaders Senior Advisory Group, but Raki pointed out to me that that spells LSAG, and that doesn't sound fun. So because she's a lawyer, she made me change it to LSAT.
Yep, it's true.
But we have a series of senior advisors to the leader in that group, two of whom, Parmeet Singh Boprai and Rod Loyola, are our senior advisors on outreach. And their job really is to help us systemize the great work we've been doing. I think MLA Heather Sweet is here. Oh no, I think Heather Sweet's the only one who couldn't come because she's doing rural outreach.
Here. She's here.
Is she here? Yeah. Okay, so Heather Sweet has been doing unbelievable work in the communities outside of Calgary and Edmonton. So now our job is to systemize that. Our job is to pull that together and continue to build that in a very thoughtful way. But I want you to remind you of something, that when we went from 8,000 to 85,000 members, that wasn't just in Calgary and Edmonton. The riding of Highwood, just south of Calgary.
Woohoo, go Highwood.
Way to go, Highwood, is now one of our 5 largest ridings by membership. Who would have thought? You know, the current MLA there is the Minister of Agriculture, and who would have thought that a leader of the Alberta New Democrats would confidently stand on a stage and say, we're going to win Highwood. And thanks to the work of the incredible volunteers in this room. And we have grown in leaps and bounds across the province. So when you hear me talk about an 87 riding strategy, it doesn't mean we're going to win all 87 ridings. I hope we do, but we're not going to win all 87 ridings. It doesn't mean that we're going to have the exact same resources across all those ridings, but it means we're going to show up everywhere. This summer we've been showing up. I've been in so many small town parades this summer. It's been fantastic. But it means we're always going to show up, and it means we're going to find those places we can win. And the place you can really help us, those of you who represent some of these ridings, help us with your municipal governments. The municipal governments have been beaten up so badly by this province. I said at Alberta Municipalities last week that we're used to being treated with neglect by provincial government, but this is different. This is being treated with contempt. And so if we can help in these upcoming municipal elections, have your neighbors start talking about how badly the UCP has been treating your municipal governments, and by extension, people in those areas, that's a really good conversation starter for us.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, hello, Mr. Nenshi. UCP is dividing AHS and pushing for privatization. How would the NDP fix the healthcare problem if the NDP, when the NDP becomes the governing party?
So you saw on stage with us Dr. Lou-Anne Metz. Dr. Metz was our healthcare critic, but she has agreed to sort of step away from the cut and thrust of the everyday life in the House. You still have to be there for question period, Luann, to take on a new role. So she's another member of that Leaders Senior Advisory Team, and she is the co-chair of what I am calling, until I can come up with a better name, the senior advisor now, of what I'm calling the Commission on the Future of Healthcare. Because the real challenge I think we have is back to pinball premier, is that the current government is careening wildly between different ideas that are not in any way informed by evidence. I'm an old-fashioned politician. I believe in evidence-based decision-making. This government believes in decision-based evidence-making. But so what Lou-Anne is going to spend the next weeks, months, and couple of years doing is talking to experts, stakeholders, people in the system, patients across the province to really develop a full platform on healthcare that we can go into the 2027 election with. Because I don't want to walk up to exhausted healthcare workers in 2027 and say, you've just been through a wrenching transformation, let's do it again. We want to make sure that Albertans know exactly who we are, what we stand for, and what we will do with evidence-based policy that is informed by the people who do the hard work in the system every single day. Unlike what we have now. By the way, did you hear the latest? Do you know how they're splitting AHS into 4? Did you hear that the minister announced actually it's 5 now? The 5th one is called the Integration Council, and its job is to try and get the other 4 to work together. I can think of a way that the other 4 could have worked together. It's all ridiculous, and I just need to say to folks working in healthcare, we need your minds, we need your assistance, hang in there, help is on the way.
The next question is a very good one, and one I'm interested in. Alberta's data shows a 40% gender wage gap. With most provinces and federal governments achieving pay equity laws, will you commit to similar legislation?
Yeah, we have to really look at wage gaps across our system. There's certainly a gender wage gap. We have to figure out how people who are living with disability can live without poverty.
100%.
We have to address the youth wage gap because we have to understand that levels of income inequality in Alberta are higher now than they've ever been. And so we have to look at addressing wage gaps in a number of ways, but also understand that poverty is increasingly gendered in this province, and particularly women, particularly racialized women who are working at the front lines of our public sector, of our healthcare system and so on, are also working at the front lines of poverty. I don't need to tell any of you that this week under Danielle Smith, we achieved a new low, literally. Under Rachel Notley, Alberta had the highest minimum wage in the country. Under Danielle Smith, as of this week, we have the lowest minimum wage in the country. And so we have to be able to address all of these gaps and ensure that we're striving to a place where everybody, women, men, racialized people, have the ability to live a life with dignity. Because as I always say, if you go to work every day, you deserve to live a decent life. And those are things that we have to be able to address when the market fails.
The next one's more of, it's not really a question, it's more of a statement, but I think it touches on a topic many are interested in. So Alberta should be Canada's energy leader. This means oil, gas, solar, wind, thermal, not just oil and gas.
I mean, yes, that's an easy one. We need an all-of-the-above energy strategy. I happen to believe that access to clean, safe, green energy is the strongest anti-poverty tool we have in the world. And I believe what a lot of folks say, which is that the last barrel of oil burned in the world should be an Alberta barrel of oil. But that said, you can't just say it. You have to earn it. And we have to earn it with the best environmental standards, the best human rights standards, the best labor standards, that people will want to continue purchasing that product, while at the same time ensuring that as Albertans we are leading the world in showing the world what a resource-based economy can do to fight climate change, and how together we can be an example for the world on how to do that. And of course, we all know that our current government is reflexively opposed to all of it. We know that Danielle's renewables moratorium, again, pinball premier that came out of the blue, cost at least a minimum of $33 billion of investment in Alberta, if not $300 billion. It cost jobs across this province. We went from being the #1 place in North America to invest in renewables to not even on the list. All because of a stroke of a pen. And in places like Cardston County that have seen good jobs eliminated because people don't want to invest anymore, this is an example of exactly what not to do. And we need to be able to build an electricity grid that is robust. And look, I'll tell you that the federal government's clean electricity regulations will not work for Alberta. But instead of just yelling about it, let's work with them to develop a grid plan that brings in the renewables, that does work for Alberta, that recognizes the reality of what's going on here. This government only wants to fight. I want to win.
Yeah. Okay, the next question, it's two parts. How do you plan to win a majority in the next election, and what can you do to rebrand the NDP and separate from the federal NDP in voters' minds?
You're asking the tough questions now, particularly in this room.
Yeah.
We do have a strategy to win the next election, building on the remarkable work that's been done. I will tell you that, look, we got 45% of the vote in the last election, which is a remarkable achievement. To get from 45 to 55 or more is going to take a different strategy than what it took to get us to 45. At the same time, we can't lose any of the 45. So we do have to be thoughtful and strategic about going forward. We have to ensure that we're calling out this government every chance we get, but that we were also giving Albertans a positive alternative, that we're bringing back joy and hope and optimism and big blue sky thinking about what is possible in Alberta. And you're going to see a lot of that rolling out over the next little while, but we'll also be looking to a lot of you to help us with that. That grassroots work that I keep talking about is really important, but we also want your ideas and your thoughts and your expertise. Now, on the question of the federal party, I have heard loud and clear from the membership that you are ready to have this conversation. In fact, I've heard loud and clear from the membership that you've been ready to have this conversation for a really long time. So we're going to start that conversation at Provincial Council here. There's no decisions that have been made. There's nothing that has been set in stone. But we need to have this conversation, and I'll be doing a Q&A with the delegates after lunch, and we can talk a little bit more in detail about that. But it is time for us to ensure that our neighbours know that while we will never forget our roots, while we will never give up on the values of Tommy Douglas and of Jack Layton, that we are, in fact, our own people as well. And we represent Albertans. That's why I rarely say Alberta NDP, I say Alberta's New Democrats. It's just a minor thing, but it is an opportunity for us to be able to have that conversation with our friends and our neighbours.
We have about 10 minutes left, so we'll get through a few more questions. So,
I'll go a bit faster.
what is being done to prevent the Eastern Slope Coal Development Project from being approved? Will the United Conservatives be allowed to go forward with that?
Well, the answer to where we stand on coal mining in the Eastern Slopes is a really complex answer. No.
Yeah.
We will do everything in our power to ensure that that does not move forward, but this is up to Albertans. Because again, we have a government that promised to do it, then not do it, and then stealthily through the back door did it, and we understand there are allegations that the minister interfered in that process and told the arm's length regulator to reopen the hearings. We don't know if that's entirely true, but this is not good. This is not how a regulator should be treated. This is not the work we need to do. So we need to make sure that we're standing up with Albertans in this regulatory process and talk about why we don't need the selenium in the water downstream, that just because we can doesn't mean we should, and that ultimately we need to reclaim and maintain the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains as a part of our patrimony, as a part of our heritage, as a part of human heritage, as a part of our commitment to the world. And that is what we will continue to do.
What is your plan for undoing the damage that Take Back Alberta has done? Will you be committed to preserving our rights as Canadians from separatist policies?
I sort of feel like we need to take back Alberta. In fact, there was a campaign volunteer of mine who did something mischievous. I don't know if it's still there, but if you go to takebackalberta.ca, you might find something kind of funny. But you know, this is the big problem, is that we have allowed the government to be captured. We've allowed government to be captured by a small, tiny minority of Albertans and focused on things that don't matter to the majority of Albertans. So our job is to ensure that all of our friends and neighbours understand that we represent the median Albertan, that our values are the values of Albertans, and that we will be a government for all of us. It's not just a slogan. It's something we feel very deeply and we got to keep working on.
What are some policies you will pursue to help the working poor, individuals making less than $50,000 per year?
Great, great question. So first of all, obviously we need to increase the minimum wage. And what we must do with the minimum wage is ensure that it is on a stable and predictable growth stream, that it grows every year in conjunction with wage inflation or another metric. Samir Kayande, the Leader Special Advisor on Analytics, will tell me what the right metric is at some point. But we need to do that so that we don't have these huge switches and changes in the economy that just push people further and further behind. That's important. We need to ensure that public services are there for people who are continuing to go to work every day. So we need to make sure, as my own family knew growing up pretty poor, I say sometimes we were poor, sometimes we were very, very poor, but we always knew that the community was there for us, and the access to public education, the access to being able to learn to swim in a public pool, access to public transit, that's another one that the province is pulling back on, the low-income public transit pass, something I was very proud to put in place when I was mayor. Those sort of programs really matter to people. Ultimately, folks do need the ability to have a decent job and make a decent living. Those who are able to work need to be able to do that. I always say for those that are able to work, the best social program is a decent job. But we need to also ensure that people are being treated fairly and that we're working really hard on the affordability question, whether it's housing or utilities or auto insurance, the things that are under our control. We need to make sure that people are able to access that decent life through those areas.
I'll just make a little plug there too for working for affordable childcare. Affordable childcare.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that.
I will never stop talking about that.
I think I see, these are on the screen. I think I see like 3 that are all about education.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just
We'll
kind
just
of
take
lump
those
those together. So how will Alberta's NDP tackle the current state of education funding in Alberta? Perhaps a little bit more controversially, will you commit to funding only public education and not private or charter schools?
And the bottom one.
Oh, and then the bottom one, will you invest in education to improve the quality of primary and secondary schooling and reduce the cost burden on families and individuals?
So look, number one is it's very clear that with the population growth that we've been seeing, we have been massively underfunding public education. So here in the Calgary Board of Education, Alberta's largest board, for example, last year they needed 22 new elementary schools just to keep up with growth, and they were given funding for 1. So, and by the way, the Premier pretends that she was surprised by this certain sudden population growth. I mean, we've all been a bit surprised by it, and if there's a question on immigration, I can talk about where I think the federal government has actually made a terrible error in all of this. But we knew years ago that we were chronically underfunding education. So the $8.3 billion for new schools is a welcome announcement. We got to do it right. I'll come back to that in a second. But we also have to recognize that we have the lowest per student financing funding of any jurisdiction in Canada.
Yeah, shame.
So part of the answer is money. We've got to refund the system. The good news is when you're the mayor, you never had any money, so you're really good at finding money. Part of it is treating the people who work in the system with dignity and respect. In Fort McMurray last week, the government imposed a dispute resolution board because they weren't willing to have a settlement with education assistants and support workers in the schools. We can't treat people like that, especially the education assistants who are the linchpin to the work that we're doing. So it really starts with listening to the experts and treating the people who work in the system with respect. Now, Premier Smith also announced something a bit shocking in the last announcement that she made, where she said for the first time, I think in Canadian history, she's looking at capital funding for private schools. I think I know what she's doing. So since we're in a members-only event, I will tell you that I think her theory is that if she funds religious private schools, then she'll be able to secure the vote of minority religious communities. It ain't gonna work, but at the same time, it's pretty capricious. And it's pretty capricious for us to say that we should take money from all taxpayers and use it to build schools that are only accessible to a small portion of us. You know, public education must be publicly delivered. And we need to build up we need to build a public education system that is so attractive that people don't even think about any choices other than sending their kid to the great public school in their neighborhood.
We have less than 2 minutes left. There's two questions. The first one is about the Green Line. Do we think Naheed can answer a question about the Green Line? Okay, the Green Line has reviewed numerous times. Construction began, funding has been withdrawn. What will you do to help the Green Line be built in Calgary?
The Green Line is not a crayon line on a map. It's a public transit project that needs to get people from where they live to where they need to go. Simple as that. So if we can build a Green Line project that serves the people of deep South Calgary as well as the people of North Central Calgary, that connects those communities to downtown, that is built, in a way that makes it ready for future expansion, then that's something we're going to fund when we're in government. That's something that we need to build. The Green Line project is the largest infrastructure project in Calgary's history. It will double the LRT in Calgary. I think people don't understand the scope of it when it's done. And the plan that the city had was always to build the most expensive part first, because we'll never get that kind of funding again, and then use typical annual funding to keep building out on either end. What the Conservatives want to do is build the easy part first and waste all the money on that so that we'll never have the money to build the part in the middle. So I tell you, a Green Line that goes from Seaton to the Arena, or a Green Line that goes from Shepherd to City Hall, will not get people where they need to go. You can't drop people off 2 kilometers away from their job and expect them to hoof it the rest of the way. You cannot expect people to get off the Green Line and transfer to an already packed red or blue line train at City Hall so that they can continue their journey. And by the way, that solution never serves the North. So we've got to find, I believe the city had the right solution, I know, because I worked on it really hard. If there are better solutions out there, I'm open-minded, but they have to meet those criteria, but we'll make it happen.
So I think we can end with one more question, because I think this is probably a message you probably want to leave all of our members with today. So the question is probably one that many of you have asked yourselves. So I'm so frustrated and angry watching the UCP destroying everything in Alberta. I feel helpless. What can we be doing to force the UCP to stop hurting Albertans?
You are not helpless. None of us are helpless. No matter what they say, no matter how they act, we live in a democracy. We live in a place where we can tell our elected representatives what we need. So yes, we're going to build the movement. Yes, we're going to find joy in building that movement. Yes, we're going to build that movement to winning in 2027. But in the meantime, we need to make our voices heard. Because look, real change does not happen from extremely handsome politicians giving speeches in a ballroom, by which I mean Marlon Schmidt. It happens because every one of us makes it happen. It happens because everyday people use our everyday hearts and minds and our everyday souls, and especially these days, our everyday voices to make real change. So I know you're frustrated. I know you're angry. Imagine if all you did all day was listen to the government. Imagine if you had a 10 a.m. meeting every morning, the agenda of which is what horrible thing did they do today? Oh, did I just describe my life? So I get it. I get the frustration and I get the anger. But this is what they want. They want us to be hopeless. They want us to be helpless. They want all of us to believe that the system that we have today is as good as it's ever going to get, and they're the only ones who can defend it. But we know better than that. We know what is possible. We know what this Alberta is. We know what this Alberta means. And we know that together we will, to coin a phrase, take back Alberta. but together we are going to build a better Alberta for everyone. So forget the helplessness, forget the hopelessness, rise up, and let's continue the fight. Thank you all.
Well done, my friend.